WatchMaestro fam, welcome back to the channel. Today we got a episode that's going to be actually practical. So you might have worked hard now for a couple of years, saved your money, and now you're going to go for that watch, for that Rolex watch, more specifically. But there are so many Rolex watches. Which one do you get? How do you know which one to go for? What's the difference between them? They look different. Are they actually different? What's so different about them? So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to give you a little bit of a crash course in some of the more popular Rolex watches. Not all the models, but some of the most popular ones that you're probably going to come across. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a breakdown as to some information about them that is important for you to consider, and a little bit of a story and history about them. So maybe that will resonate with you. Maybe you can relate a little bit, connect a little bit to what it's about, what that particular piece is about, and that will interest you and make you want to buy that particular model. So let's get started. Here are, what do we got? 4, 5, 6 different models. We're going to start one by one. The first one, we have to start with this one, and that is the Rolex Datejust. If you are watching this and already have had a collection of watches, especially Rolex watches, you probably own a Datejust right now, or you've had one in the past. If you don't, you probably will have one at some point, especially if you like Rolex in any way, shape or form. The Datejust is a classic when it comes to Rolex watches. You can't talk about Rolex watches and not include the Rolex Datejust in that conversation. The Rolex Datejust was actually released by Rolex to commemorate their 40th anniversary. It was the first watch of its kind in the world where it had the date function as well, and that date function changed over automatically at the stroke of midnight. Now, when they first came out, they were in 36mm only. Over time, they've gone on to also introduce the 41mm Datejust into the market as well. When they first came out, actually, the very first few Datejusts were only in full gold, believe it or not, in full yellow gold. Nowadays, it's actually much more common for you to find them in steel models. If you want precious metals such as yellow gold or rose gold, you would have to pay obviously extra for them, and they're not as common to find. Also, the other thing that has sort of changed over time is the bezel. So nowadays you can get the fluted bezel as well as what you got right now, which is the smooth bezel. We did another video on the Datejust models on our YouTube channel, so you can flick back and have a look at that if you want to have a little bit more of an in-depth look into the Rolex Datejust itself. So that's as far as the Datejust is concerned. It is, like I said, one of the most iconic pieces, one of the backbone pieces of Rolex, right? If you are a Rolex enthusiast of any kind, you probably have owned one or will own one at some point. So that's as far as that's concerned. And in terms of price point, in relation to certainly these other pieces here, and probably most of Rolex's pieces, if not all, it's the one that is more suitable for an entry-level kind of budget. All right. So it's the one that's the most friendly on your wallet. But you get to rock a Rolex. It's a very respectable Rolex, right? And away you go. So that's as far as the Datejust is concerned. Next, let's talk about, we'll sort of work our way up, right? Let's talk about the Submariner. So the Submariner was introduced, I believe, in the 50s, and it was the very first watch that was designed for diving specifically, so actual diving, that was waterproof up to 100 meters. It was the first watch of its kind in the world at the time. And originally when they first came out, they didn't have the dates, just like this one doesn't. See, it does not have a date window here, it doesn't have a date complication. Eventually, over time, Rolex introduced the date complication onto Submariner. And in fact, the date complication, obviously originating from the Datejust itself, became a thing that is now very commonplace with certainly almost all Rolex watches. I mean, you expect it on there even, right? A lot of times people have so much of a stipulation that there must be a date that they won't buy something that doesn't have a date function on there unless they want a more of a clean look like this, for example, or if they have some other reason for it. So that was the first initial reason why the Submariner was released. It was in fact made specifically for divers due to its rotating bezel to allow divers to understand how much time they have left to be able to be submerged underwater. Initially, the bezel rotated both ways, and then eventually they made it just to rotate one way for extra safety precautions. So that's the history of where the Submariner came from. The Submariner is an extremely tough and very versatile tool watch. It only ever comes in the oyster bracelet, and it's one of those watches that, I mean, you can insert the word most in front of this watch, you know, the most recognizable, the most valuable, the most bang for your buck. It's instantly recognizable on anybody's wrist if you're somebody who's even mildly into watches, especially the black bezel. Now they obviously have different color schemes. So they have the green bezel with the black dial, they have the green bezel with the green dial, they've got the bluesy, so the blue dial, all kinds of different variations. But this one's the one that is, again, a little bit more of the entry level one. And as far as the color scheme compared to the other ones, is the one that is cheaper and a little bit more also sought after. Not because it's cheaper, and when I say cheap, I don't mean it's cheap, I just mean it's more affordable. Part of the reason why this is actually more popular in that regard is because of resale. So when somebody buys a watch, sometimes they also think about, if I come to sell this sometime down the track, how likely am I going to be able to sell something that's, for example, like pink colored, right? It's less likely that people are going to be into some kind of a color, especially a wild, more outrageous color, such as, for example, a green bezel and a green dial, than they would be with something like this. So if you buy a watch and at any given time you need to let it go quickly to free up some cash, this is probably going to go faster than a Hulk, which is the green bezel and the green dial, right? Or you know, some of the two-tone ones where you have two-tone bracelets, for example. So for that reason, this is one of the color schemes that you'll see on most people's wrists if they have a Rolex Submariner. Excellent watch, very, very reliable for obvious reasons. I mean, it was originally designed for divers, so it had to be as reliable as it comes. Otherwise, their lives were at stake, right? And you can't go wrong with the Submariner. The next one that's on the same level in terms of class, I guess, is the Rolex GMT. Now, originally, Pan Am approached Rolex to design a watch for their pilots for long-haul flights so that they can tell two different time zones at the same time. And Rolex came up with the GMT, the GMT-Master. And this is actually the original color that Rolex came up with, the red and blue, which is now called the Pepsi. And since then, they've gone on to develop other colors. So we have the root beer, we have the Coke, we've got the Sprite now, and there's the Bruce Wayne that just came out. So all different kinds of color schemes exist for this as well. Obviously, you can see in there's the usual hour and minute hand, but also the GMT hand, which can be set in accordance with whatever time zone that you want to be able to tell at any given time. So if you're a traveler, for example, this would be the watch for you. Okay, this is something that you would actually get use out of. Like, Rolex doesn't just create these watches and put these features in there just because it's nice to have a red and blue bezel, for example, right? They do it because it has a certain functionality to fulfill, right? The Submariner was for actual scuba divers, right? To be able to see even the time because of the luminosity of the dial, right? Of the markers on the dial, to be able to tell the time, to be able to tell how many minutes they've been submerged and when they need to go back up, right? So it has an actual functionality in that regards. The GMT similarly has an actual functionality in regards to being able to tell multiple time zones. The GMT comes in both the oyster bracelets, so like the Submariner, like that, as well as the Jubilee bracelet. Speaking of which, I actually don't know if I mentioned it, can't remember, but the Datejust was originally released in the Jubilee bracelet. And the Datejust was actually originally supposed to be called the Jubilee because it was a watch that was released for the 40th anniversary of Rolex. But they decided against it. They named it the Datejust, and actually a majority of the bracelets that you'll find on Datejust now are the Oyster bracelets. You can opt for Jubilee, which is my favorite. I personally prefer it, but a majority of the time you'll see it on the Oyster bracelet. Anyway, back to this one. So you can see that the bracelets on this one is the Jubilee bracelet. You can get it in the Oyster bracelets with the GMTs, and you can get all different kinds of color schemes. Like I said, the Pepsi, the Coke, the Batman, the Sprite, the new Bruce Wayne. You can get the two-tone gold, and so on and so forth. Excellent watch, very reliable, just like the Submariner. Can't go wrong with it. Can wear it formally, can wear it casually. You can enjoy it, you can knock it about, nothing will happen to it. Strong. So that's the next one. Then we have ourselves the always sought after Rolex Daytona. So in the early 60s, Rolex were actually producing chronographs before the Daytona came around. This was not their first chronograph. They were experimenting with chronograph watches long before this was actually officially released. But over time, their chronograph function got better and better, and they were gaining popularity, especially with race car drivers. In the early 60s, they became the official timekeeper for the Daytona races in Florida, namely the Daytona 500, which is considered to be the cradle of motorsport and racing. And what better way to associate yourself as a brand with racing than to be somehow connected to and affiliated with the race that is considered to be the mother of all races at the mother of all places when it comes to racing, right? Motor racing. And so in the early 60s, after they became, a year or two after they were the official timekeeper for the Daytona 500, they also put the actual name Daytona on their watches. And that sort of cemented them and their position or cemented the position of this watch, of the Daytona, as the go-to chronograph. That's not just a marketing ploy, they're actually fantastic watches. And as far as chronographs are concerned, they are super reliable and you just can't fault them. They are excellent watches. They've since become very big collector's pieces, especially with the now discontinued Panda. You've got especially the older, more vintage Paul Newman dial, which is one of my favorites when it comes to the Daytonas. If the racing side of things is what you're after and what interests you, the Daytona might be something that you might go for. Obviously, a little bit more of a higher price point than the Datejust, than the GMT, than the Submariner. But that's the story behind it, and part of the reason for that is because of the chronograph function. I don't know if you guys know or not, but actually the chronograph function is one of the hardest, if not the hardest functions, complications to put inside a watch and make sure it works properly. And the chronograph function on a Rolex Daytona, it not only does it work properly, it's actually one of the most reliable, okay? So that's as far as that's concerned. After that, I'll save my personal favorite for last. Not necessarily best for last, but my personal favorite for last. So this one's the Sky-Dweller. The Sky-Dweller was introduced, I believe, in 2012. And it's basically more beefed up, a bigger version, like literally a bigger version, and also bigger in sense of presence, in the sense of the use of precious metals, right? It's a bigger version of the GMT. So it was designed for travelers, right? Because it can tell the date, it can obviously tell the time, it can tell the month as well as another time zone, all simultaneously. And it's an annual calendar. So once you set it once for the year, as long as the watch continues to run and doesn't stop, you don't need to reset the calendar in any way at all. So you've got obviously date window over here, which will tell you the date. You have, if you see this red marking over here, this window here that has the red there, That window exists on top of every single hour marker. And each one gives you an indication of the month of the year. So number 12 would be the 12th month, being December. So if you're in January, you'd see the red on top of number 1. If you're in February, you'd see it on top of number 2, and so on. And this little wheel in the middle here, that's the wheel that indicates the time at the second time zone that you want to set it to, okay? It is Rolex's most complicated watch. People don't know that. People just look at this at first glance and they think it's just like a bigger Datejust, and don't give it a second look until they actually find out more about the watch and they're like, oh wow, that's actually pretty impressive. So it isn't just a Datejust. It isn't just a bigger Datejust. It is a more beefed up, more respectable GMT in the sense of its complications. It's the most complicated watch that Rolex makes, and also in the sense of its use of precious metals. You can get them. You can get these in rose gold. You can get these in yellow gold. You can get them in different straps. So this is the Oyster Flex. You can get it in the Jubilee. You can get it in the Oyster. You can get it in steel as well if that's your cup of tea. But that's as far as the story of the Sky-Dweller is concerned. So if you're a traveler, that might be something that you want to go for, right? If you've got the money to spend. And finally, probably one of my favorites would be the Rolex Day-Date, also known as the Rolex President. Why is it called the Rolex President? Well, so a couple of things. Firstly, this is the first watch in the world that could tell the date as well as the day of the week simultaneously and automatically, right? It was the first watch of its kind to do that. Also, all Day-Dates are always made using precious metals. So you only will ever see them either in rose gold, yellow gold, or platinum, my favorite. They have, through the years, through the decades, have made multiple different variations, especially when it comes to the dials. There's some very rare ones that are absolutely amazing, some of the more vintage ones. Very hard to find, very rare, and really nicely set factory dials. With different diamond sort of configurations and different dial designs and things like that. Originally they were in the 36mm, and nowadays you can also get them in the bigger version like this. Now this one here is one of my favorite current models, like the new modern models, which is rose gold with the olive green dial and the Roman numerals. This one is to die for. I think just last week we sold like 4 of these, and that's for good reason. These ones are only going to go up in value, in my opinion, because sooner or later this dial color is going to become discontinued. I think within the next probably 2 years, this is going to become discontinued. And about a year ago, this was almost a third more in price than it is right now. And now is the time to buy. But back to the original question, why is it called the President? It's because the 36th president, which was President Eisenhower, I think, was gifted one of these. And because it's made of precious metals entirely and exclusively, and because obviously it tells you the date as well as the day of the week, so it keeps you a little bit more organized, presidents and anybody noteworthy would wear these all the time. This bracelet also, this particular design, as you may notice, is different to, say, this one. That's a Jubilee, right? And it's different to this one, which is the Oyster. You can tell the difference between them, right? This has got a semicircular sort of design here. Very beautiful bracelet that really pops under the right light, especially. This is called the President bracelet, and one of the standout things about the President bracelet is it's got this concealed kind of look, whereas these other ones have distinct clasps, right? They have this distinct clasp, but the President bracelet has this concealed look, so it gives it a much more clean sort of finish to the watch. I think this is an absolute head turner in formal occasions, in casual occasions. You can wear this anywhere and feel like it's the right thing to wear wherever you are. So guys, this one is obviously, as I said, I'm going to sort of rank them from kind of lower on the budget scale to higher. So yeah, this one would be on the higher side, especially with the rose gold. You can certainly get ones even higher than that. Depends how much you want to spend and what kind of precious metals you want to pay for. But those are some of the more important, some of the more common Rolex models, and that's a little bit of story behind them, and maybe that will help you decide which one you want to buy when it comes for you to actually make a decision on buying one. Guys, don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you need to buy, sell, or trade your watches, you know where to come. WatchMaestro.com. Until next one.